Hey guys, welcome to That Florida Feeling. How is everybody this week? I hope everybody's having a good week. It's actually kind of rainy here. So I'm so glad that we all like carne asada tacos, and most of us are right-handed. Although I was kind of surprised. There's a lot of both for an answer, and I was kind of like, all right, y'all do you. That's awesome. But yeah, thanks for doing the polls and the questions. I always love that you guys interact with that. Thank you so much. I think it's just something fun to do each week. Thank you to everybody that liked, subscribed, followed the podcast on Apple or Google or Spotify. And thanks for those of you who've joined the group and the page on Facebook. You guys are awesome. As always, the Instagram. I appreciate all the followers and everybody that interacts with that one. I am probably just gonna. I'm not feeling TikTok anymore, guys. I don't know. Oh, I have a special guest today. Oh my goodness, he has a lot to say. How do you feel about the topic today? Really? I didn't know that. That too, huh? And anything else, Butterfinger? No, you're gonna let me do the rest of it? Okay, thank you. That was my special guest for the day, Butterfinger. He likes to make his podcast debuts every now and then. And if you hear anything running around, that is still Butterfinger. He's my psycho orange kitty that you see in pictures. So I'm glad he could be my special guest for the day. We are going to talk about someone that is probably not well known, but is pretty notorious here in Florida. Now, I'm sure you've all heard of John Dillinger and D.B. Cooper, Bonnie and Clyde. But what about John Ashley? Have you ever heard of him? Does his name sound familiar? Well, if you're in South Florida, it might. So to the rest of you, I'm going to let you know. John Hopkins Ashley was born March 19th. They don't know exactly the year, so that's either 1888 or 1895. But John Ashley was known as the King of the Everglades, or the Swamp Bandit. That's right, he was a bandit. And he pretty much was an American outlaw, a bank robber, a bootlegger, and an occasional pirate from the 1910s to the 1920s in South Florida. That's hence his nickname, the King of the Everglades, or the Swamp Bandit. And I will tell you how he got those names. Now, John Ashley was born and raised in the backwoods of the Caloosahatchee River, near the community of Buckingham, Florida, which is near Fort Myers. And he was one of 9 children born to Joe Ashley, a poor Florida woodsman, who made his living by fishing, hunting, and trapping otters. So the Ashley family was outdoorsy. And the Ashley family actually moved from Fort Myers to Pompano, which, as you know, is the other side of the state. Fort Myers is by Naples, Pompano is by Miami. And they moved in the 1890s, where Joe Ashley and the older sons would work on the new railroad being built by Flagler. Everything circles back to Henry Flagler, I swear. Anyways, so in 1911, Joe and his family decided they wanted to go a little bit further, and they ended up in West Palm Beach. Actually, that's a little more north. All right, so they're in West Palm Beach as of 1911, and Joe actually briefly served as the county sheriff. So how does John play into this? John was one of those kids, and he actually spent a lot of his youth in the Florida Everglades. And like his dad, he became a skilled trapper and an alligator hunter. So again, very outdoorsy, probably really self-sufficient in all truth. So John Ashley did his thing, and he worked with different people, and, you know, he got a little bit of a reputation. He knew how to go and hide in the swamps, and he knew how to do things, and he was known for being a little bit of rambunctious, we'll say. And of course, in all this time, he also learned how to make moonshine out in the Everglades. And so while he's doing that, he also helped his family, and he learned from his family, like I said. And sorry, I don't realize what I wrote. Sorry. Instead of Seminoles, I wrote something else. I've made up my own English. So when they were in the Everglades and they were swamping and trapping and doing their things and being rebellious, they actually got to know some of the local Seminoles in the area. And they taught them the way through the Everglades, and they learned all the ways and even learned new stuff and even did some trading. And so all this happened, and then by 1912, John was a little bit older. He was doing his thing, but he was also accused at this time of murdering a Seminole trapper, DeSoto Tiger. And DeSoto Tiger was the son of Tommy Tiger, who was the chieftain of the Cow Creek Seminoles and a veteran of the Third Seminole War. So everybody kind of knew DeSoto Tiger. And DeSoto's body was discovered on December 29th, 1911, and they found it, actually, in a weird way. They were dredging near Lake Okeechobee, and they actually dredged up his body. And an investigation was held, and soon they decided that John Ashley was their main suspect. According to a fellow Seminole, Jimmy Gopher, Ashley had last been seen with DeSoto when they were traveling in a canoe together with a boatload of otter hides. Side note, guys, I wrote buttload. I guess it could kind of be the same thing. A boatload of otter hides to sell at a local market. And authorities were also told by fur traders in Miami, which have some really interesting names, the Gertman brothers, but these are fur traders in Miami, and they told them that John Ashley had actually sold them $1,200 worth of hides. And the previous day, he had also been arrested for charge of reckless display of firearms. So between the arrest for reckless display of firearms and the $1,200 hides that just came up, they were pretty much putting together that John Ashley did have something to do with this. So two deputies, S.A. Barfield and Bob Hannon, found Ashley camping in a palmetto thicket, which, if you're wondering what a palmetto thicket is, it's basically just like a group of palmettos. That's really it. I don't know why they just didn't say that. But anyways, they was in a palmetto thicket near Hope Sound, and they wanted to take him into custody. But he wasn't going to go down easy. So they were surprised by his brother, Bob Ashley, who they disarmed at their gunpoint, and John Ashley sent the officers back with a message for Sheriff George B. Baker: "Don't send any more chicken-hearted men with their rifles, or they're apt to get hurt." So basically, Bob Ashley disarmed the guys and sent them packing. "Do not come for me," was his message. But eventually, he did get arrested for murder, but he was not convicted. He was not. So there was a second trial in 1915 where he was sentenced to hang for Tiger's murder, but the conviction was overturned by the Florida Supreme Court. And Ashley, every time he was arrested, he would repeatedly escape from various jails and elude law enforcement. So just keep that in mind. So after he has gotten out of the crime of murder, the Seminole Nation actually protested over this murder, by the way, and the government had to threaten to intervene. So John Ashley left. He was like, "There's too much heat. Whether I did it or not, I'm leaving." And he fled to New Orleans for a year or two before he returned to Florida. And this is in 1914. And, there's other, they don't think he stayed in New Orleans. There's rumors that he went to be a logger in Seattle. Some claimed he robbed a bank in Canada. Either way, the man was up to no good, but came back to Florida. And upon his return, he surrendered himself to authorities in West Palm Beach, and that was where he was imprisoned for the first trial. And he might have hoped a hometown jury would sympathize with him. However, the local prosecutor petitioned the judge to change the venue to Miami. Hearing of these plans, Ashley said, "I'm not doing this." He escaped. And he was being escorted to his cell by Sheriff Bob Baker's son. Sheriff Bob Baker had it out for Ashley, by the way. You can kind of see it later in the story, or through his story. He was being escorted to a cell by Sheriff Bob Baker's son, Robert C. Baker, when he broke away, ran out an unlocked door, and climbed a 10-foot fence to freedom. And that is the beginning of John Ashley being an outlaw. And him and his brothers kind of all became outlaws. They would have occasional partners, but they did form an actual criminal gang. So, we now have Ashley's gang. And let me tell you, they were well known in the area. So in 1915, he and Bob Ashley robbed an FEC passenger train with Chicago mobster Kid Lowe. So the first attempt was less than successful. They actually failed to agree on who would collect the valuables from the passengers or rob the mail car. So not a lot happened that time. But they didn't give up. They actually ended up stealing $45,000 in silver and cash during a bank robbery in Stuart, Florida. During the getaway, however, Lowe accidentally shot John Ashley in the jaw, costing him the sight of his eye. So get that right, a person in his own gang shot him in the jaw. I'm more surprised that he continued to keep him in the gang, but he did. And that is also why John Ashley wore an eye patch. So when I post the picture of John Ashley, yes, he's going to have an eye patch. That's because he did lose his eye attempting to rob a bank. Actually, not attempting, they did rob the bank. But when Ashley attempted to get medical condition for his eye, he was captured and held in the Dade County jailhouse to await trial. They're still going to get him on this murder charge for DeSoto Tiger. So they were going to take him in for that, but the state's attorney actually believed that they had a better chance at prosecuting him for the robberies in Stuart, so the bank robbery, and they were going to take him to West Palm Beach instead. So he's in jail again. We all know what's going to happen. On June of 1915, Bob Ashley attempted to break his brother John out of jail. Entering the jailer's house, Bob Ashley shot Deputy Sheriff Wilbur W. Hendrickson at point-blank range and left with his jail keys. He then ran from his house to the garage where the gang members had a getaway car. He could not drive the car that they left for him, so he attempted to force several men at gunpoint to drive the car for him. Each man claimed they did not know how to drive the car either, so Bob Ashley jumped on the running board of a passing truck and forced the driver to take him out of town. So this man's getaway is not going well. This is when another deputy, J.R. Riblett, spotted Ashley and gave chase. Now remember, this is Bob Ashley, not John. John is still in jail. And when the truck suddenly stalled in the middle of the street, a shootout occurred and Bob Ashley was killed. So was Deputy Officer Riblett. This angered John. It also angered a lot of other people. Several thousand Miami residents threatened the jailhouse and talked of lynching John Ashley in his cell. So, Miami's mad because Riblett got shot. Ashley's mad his brother got shot. The police paraded the body of Bob Ashley through the streets to disperse the mob. Talk about a way to deal with it. I don't even know what to say about that. So, John Ashley's in jail. He, got convicted on November 23rd, 1916. Ashley pled guilty to the robbery and was sentenced to 17 years at the state penitentiary in Ralford, which is up in Union County, Florida. So, Ashley is going to go to jail for 17 years. The gang is kind of dispersed. There's nothing really going on because now their leader's kind of in jail. So, Ashley was in jail and he feigned good behavior. He was going to get out. He was, they thought that he was changing and that he was going to be good. He was actually assigned to working on a road camp. And this led to his escape in March of 1918, and he went right back in the business of robbing the banks. Now, prior to him being arrested for all of this, he had actually begun a relationship with Laura Up the Grove. Yes, her actual last name is Up the Grove. Up the Grove. One word. I had to look at that like 3 times. And Up the Grove actually joined in the gangs. She participated. She was usually the lookout, but sometimes she was the getaway driver. She was ride or die. Whenever she heard the authorities that were nearing one of Ashley's hideouts, she would drive her car through a secret backwood trails to warn the gang members to leave. She also cased banks, and while they were together, she was the queen of the Everglades as he was her king. And she actually took on the role of almost leader of the gang when he was incarcerated. Now, like I said, he behaved as a good prisoner after 2 years, and he escaped from the road camp he had been assigned to. And he didn't have help, though. He had the assistance of fellow bank robber Tom Maddox, and this happened on March 31st of 1918. This is also kind of the start of Prohibition. This is around the Prohibition time. So, he remembered moonshining as a kid. He decided he was just going to pick it up and do it again. And he began moonshining in the Everglades. And the Ashley gang continued moonshining, and they had many stills in the woods of Central and South Florida. They even began hijacking rum runners and moving product that way. Now, Ashley was actually recaptured in June of 1921. So this man has many run-ins with the law, and I mean many. He was actually nabbed while driving liquor to Wauchula, 70 miles southeast of Tampa, which is in Hardee County in the middle of the state, in the middle of nowhere, but that is probably some of the prettiest country you'll ever see, especially along the Peace River. And as soon as he was captured, he was sent right back to Railford Prison. And not one to be deterred, Ed and Frank Ashley continued rum running straight from the Bahamas. And he was, they were keeping the tradition alive while John was in jail again. So John Ashley was doing his thing. He was in jail. But while he was in jail, unfortunately, his brothers had a bad run-in, and Ed and Frank Ashley were running liquor from the Bahamas to Jupiter Inlet. And his brothers disappeared, never to return, in October of 1929. So, we all know what that means. He's not going to sit there much longer. They don't actually know how he got out of how he escaped the third time, only that he vanished from his cell and returned to bank robbing with his gang. And this is actually one of the more memorable robberies, as the gang managed to rob the Stewart Bank that they had already robbed a second time in September of 1923. And the way they did it is, one of the Ashley's teenage nephews, Hanford Mobley, snuck into the building disguised as a woman and escaped with several thousands of dollars. Unfortunately, though, shortly after the robbery, Middleton and Mobley, they were riding together, were caught in Plant City. Again, though, they all escaped. All these people escaped. Nobody stays in jail in this family. It's just not going to happen. So they escaped and went right back to their robbing banks. But they're not with John Ashley anymore. They're doing their own thing. So back to John Ashley. In November of 1923, the gang actually robbed and obtained $23,000 in cash and securities from a bank in Pompano. Again, like many other heists, they decided to recklessly celebrate in the streets. After wrapping the loot in a bedsheet, they slowly drove through the middle of town in a stolen taxi. They waved a bottle of whiskey at onlookers and shouted, "We got it." They left the town, crossed the canal, and disappeared into the swamp near Clewiston, which is kind of near Lake Okeechobee. And Ashley supposedly left a bullet in one of the victims to give to Sheriff Baker, again, as a message. Him and the Sheriff Baker are just going to go at it, that if he ever got out to the Glades, he'd give him his own. Now, of course, they've done rum running, they've done moonshining, they've done trapping, they've done bank robbery. So let's try something else. Let's try piracy. He actually intercepted a lot of rum runners off the coast of southern Florida. A lot of them chose to pay the protection money. So basically, pay me and I'll let you go. Give me part of your profit. But in 1924, he and his nephew, Hanford Mobley, again, the same one that dressed as a woman, actually stole a sea skiff and led a raid against rum runners in the Bahamas West End. They managed to get $8,000 from 4 wholesale liquor warehouses. And what's funny, though, is if he had hit it hours earlier, there was actually almost $250,000 that would have been in that same warehouse. So he only got $8,000 because the money was already on the way to be moved. Now, by this time, it's been a few years into Prohibition, and the Ashley gang was actually feared by bootleggers, and many deserted the areas. They weren't going to go near this gang. They didn't want to deal with them. And the Ashley's opportunity for liquor piracy actually dwindled, and they gave up and returned back to bank robbing. So piracy was good for a little while, but it just wasn't good enough. Now, I told you that the feud with Sheriff Baker would come back up. So at this point, we know that Ashley and Sheriff Baker have been engaging in sort of a personal feud. Sheriff Baker is determined to get John Ashley. And the sheriff had actually received a tip from a local car salesman that had set a trap on the eve of the Bahama raid. Suspecting that the law might be onto his plans, he changed his route the last minute and left through the St. Lucie Inlet and avoided capture, narrowly avoiding capture. So Sheriff Baker didn't get him that time. But Baker spent months searching the Everglades, and he never could find him. He just never could figure out where he was. And part of the reason is because fellow crackers, all right, I'm going to explain that if you've never heard of a Florida cracker. A Florida cracker were colonial era British and American pioneers that settled what is Florida. So it's not really a bad term. At that point, it was just the people that were named that settled the area. It was also believed to become They were cowboys. They were cowmen. Although the term, I'll give you. All right, minor history lesson. The term cracker was actually used during the Elizabethan era to describe braggarts and blowhards. But it does come from the Middle. It's from Middle English word crack, obviously cracker, and basically it was an entertaining part of this conversation or to crack a joke. So, it's not exactly the same meaning that it takes on today. Actually, Shakespeare even used cracker in King John. Act 2, Scene 1, what cracker is the same that deals our ears with abundance of superfluous breath. So basically it's a blowhard, a bragger, somebody who's cracking jokes, a wise ass. But the term changed because in the colonies, it applied the term cracker to Scots-Irish, Scots, and Native or English-American settlers of the remote South backcountry. So, not exactly a term of endearment at that point either, but it also then became associated with cowboys in Florida and Georgia. The term also describes from the fact that they would be crackers because they would crack their whips to drive the cattle. All right, now that we know what a Florida cracker is in this meeting, he had help from Florida crackers, and they had a grapevine telegraph of the Glades. So basically, all the people talked, all the people spread information, and this actually helped Ashley. He was more of a Robin Hood than a bandit to the people. But Baker might have been known as a corrupt sheriff who wasn't above shaking down poor people who were just trying to live off the land. So if Ashley's helping them and Baker's not, I would probably go with Ashley as well. So they felt the need to help this guy. The black community also helped Ashley because Sheriff Baker was a member of the Ku Klux Klan. I don't know that I'd be helping that man either. So by this time, it's 1924. It's been years that they've been going at this, and Baker finally got a lead on his location. Through his informants, Baker learned that Ashley was staying in a moonshiner's cabin hidden in the swamp about 2 miles south of the Ashley family home. So the actual family home, and then he's 2 miles south in a cabin. And the short brushes and palmetto scrubs made it really difficult to approach the cabin. There was no stealth approach to this. So it was a really good hideout. But Baker was going to get Ashley. This was his thing. So with weapons from the Florida National Guard and deputized citizens, he made plans. They were going to surround it and starve him out. So on January 10th, 1924, he sent 8 of his deputies in the early hours of the morning, and they were in position by dawn. Now, just as deputies were going to make their move, the dogs began to bark. The deputies fired at the dogs, which caused them to return fire. They killed one deputy, who actually was the sheriff's cousin, Fred Baker. He died. Now, Joe Ashley's father was killed in bunk with his, and then Albert Miller and Laura were seriously wounded by the buckshot from a shotgun. Ashley actually escaped through a secret entrance. His wife was screaming, caused the deputies to hold their fire, which actually then let him escape. So there's a lot of mayhem going on, a lot of people shooting, a lot of things going wrong, and this man just escaped. Despite the manhunt involving 200 people, John Ashley had disappeared into the night, or day. The homes of both Joe Ashley and Hanford Mobley were actually burned down to the ground, as well as a small grocery owned by Albert Miller, one of the other family members. Ashley remained in the area where Laura was being held by police, so they did detain his wife, and he hoped to jailbreak her. He also wanted to avenge the death of his father. But as more time passed, he decided to leave. They think he went to California, and he was going to lie low. He was just trying to get the heat off. So finally, Ashley returned to Florida. Several months were spent with his gang plotting their revenge. He was not going to let Sheriff Baker get away with what he had done. He actually developed a plot to kill Sheriff Baker at the Jacksonville courthouse following his election in November. This man was going to go to Jacksonville to kill this guy. So, November 1st, 1924, Baker received a tip from an anonymous source, believing to be a gang member's girlfriend or a disgruntled brother-in-law, they're not going to tell the source, that Ashley would be traveling up the coast on the Dixie Highway to rob a bank in Jacksonville. That same day, Baker arranged an ambush at the bridge over St. Sebastian's River in Roseland. And Roseland, just so I can kind of give you guys a clue, Roseland is in Indian River County, so it's kind of close to Vero Beach. So he was going to arrange an ambush over this bridge, blocking the road with a chain and a red lantern across the bridge. As the bridge was out of his jurisdiction, the actual operation was overseen by the sheriff of St. Lucie County, J.R. Merritt, along with 3 of Baker's deputies. An hour after the ambush was laid, Ashley's black car was spotted. Once it stopped at the bridge, the deputies approached the car from behind and ordered them out of the vehicle. Now, the official story is the deputies searched the car and found several guns, while Ashley, Ray Lynn, Hanford Mobley, and Clarence Middleton were lined up outside the car. Ashley then pulled out a concealed weapon, causing them to open fire, and all the gang members were killed in the shootouts. Now, that's the official story. There are other stories. The 2 alternative versions are: the first, according to 2 men who had actually witnessed the arrest, claimed they had also been stopped on the bridge and saw officers approach Ashley's car behind them. When police directed them to leave the scene, both men insisted that Ashley and the others were handcuffed, meaning he could not have pulled a concealed weapon. There were marks that could have been made by handcuffs. However, police claimed the marks were a result of the coroner examining the bodies. And the explanation was actually accepted by a coroner's jury. All right. So a coroner's jury, by the way, is it's a person who is assisting the coroner at inquest to make sure that the identity of the deceased person is true and that the cause of death is what they say. Basically, it's because somebody said, "I don't believe you." And then a third theory, one thought to be more closer to the truth, was actually not offered until the 1996 book Florida's Ashley Gang by a historian, Ada Coates Williams. An unidentified deputy claimed that while in handcuffs, Ashley made a sudden move forward and dropped his hands, causing the officer to fire. He told Williams that during the 1950s, on a promise that she not reveal this information until all the deputies have died. At that time of Ashley's death, however, though, it was widely believed among poor crackers that he had been executed by the police as some sort of frontier justice. So, do we actually know what happened? No. Do I actually kind of believe the second one where they were in handcuffs? Yes. Do I also probably, however, believe that the crackers were right? Possibly. So, there you have it. John Ashley died on November 1st, 1924. But of course, that's not the end of the story. That's still not the end of Ashley's family. So, after her death, Laura Upthegrove lived under assumed name in Western Florida for a time, and in the next 2 years, she was still arrested upon several occasions. She finally gave up and opened a gas station at Canal Point on Lake Okeechobee, and then moved in with her mother in the Up the Grove Beach, which is an unincorporated community also right outside of Lake Okeechobee. Laura had just as a violent death. She actually died on August 6th in 1927, where a man was trying to buy moonshine from her. They just say she got, my soundbar goes. They say in the heat of the moment, but it doesn't seem right. But anyway, she swallowed a bottle of disinfectant and died within minutes. They don't know if it was an accident or not. Somebody thought she might have mistaken it for a bottle of gin, but it's to believe really more that she committed suicide. And she was only 30. A few members of the Ashley gang still remained, although most were eventually killed, captured, or fled the state within only a few years. Now, only $32,000 of the gang's actual fortune was recovered, and it was actually found with an ex-gang member, Joe Tracy. But over 110,000 of in money and other things out of that they stole are still possibly out there in the Everglades. So John Ashley still has, there's fortune to be found if you believe that that's true. Now, I've actually heard of John Ashley because of his fortune. There are people to this day that still go out and look for his fortune. They believe it's hidden somewhere in the Everglades, possibly near where him and his family were living. I kind of believe that. I mean, the Everglades are huge and just deserted. You could hide anything out there. And I think it's actually absolutely a possibility that John Ashley could have hidden all that. It could still be remains. I mean, if you're bored and you're looking for something to do in Florida, I guess you could always go treasure hunting out in the Everglades, somewhere near Hobe Sound, Jupiter, that area. Now, a couple of interesting things that I will point out is that he really just stuck to southern Florida. He robbed banks in Stewart and in Hobe Sound. He pretty much stayed out near Jupiter when he was rum running. He got all the way up to Sebastian where he was killed. And he was prepared in the mortuary in Fort Pierce. You can actually see the mortuary still. So the members were laid out at the Fee Hardware Mortuary in downtown Fort Pierce. Today, the former mortuary is at Avenue A and 2nd Street, and it's a design business. So if you're ever in Fort Pierce and you want to know where John Ashley was identified and cut up, right there. The Bank of Stewart's is the Ashley Restaurant. So there's actually a restaurant named after him in Stewart. It's on West Osceola Street. And Ashley himself is buried in Stewart. He's actually buried on a golf course, a country club. He's actually on the gated community grounds of the Mariner Sands Country Club, which is at 6500 Mariner Sands Drive in Stewart, and he is right near the 18th hole. So, John Ashley is still a name known today in Florida. He's actually not as forgotten as a lot of people think. Josh Gates just actually did an episode on Expedition Unknown talking about the Ashley gang and their fortune, and he went and dug out in the Everglades. And he found things that actually show that someone did live out there near where they were saying that he was. They found part of a car, they found part of a still, they found some coins. So, is there a distinct possibility that that fortune is really out there? Yeah, absolutely. I, for one, will think that it's out there until it's found, but that's also the mystery of it. It's kind of cool to know that there was a notorious bandit that actually got away with it. He robbed banks. He helped the poor. He was a modern-day Florida Robin Hood. And you could still possibly find that treasure today. Of course, today it's worth a lot more than $100,000. But it's kind of cool. So if you actually want to look up more about John Ashley, he's actually in a couple different, there's been some popular culture references to him. There's actually a film, Little Laura and Big John, that was in 1973. They were also portrayed in the 2006 novel Queen of the Everglades. That's a book by Robert Blasky. Recently, Florida brewery Big Top Brewing Company was actually a brewery, and they had an IPA, the Ashley Gang Outlaw IPA. Actually, I don't think Big Top Brewery exists anymore. Hold on, I'm going to have to look that up, because now I realize I haven't seen their beer in the shelves in a long time, and I kind of want one. No, you can still find them. They actually still have, they're out of Sarasota if you want to get a John Ashley beer. That's totally a thing. And then there's Ashley Gang is a folklore Americana acoustic rock band out of Sebastian, Florida. And it's named after the gang, and it includes the song The Ashley Gang. So this is this is a man who's well known in Florida, and I thought this was a part of Florida that you guys might like to hear about. I, for one, think that it's fascinating. I think he's an absolutely fascinating character. I think it's really cool that Florida has its own Robin Hood. You know, Florida's all known for being Florida men and being weird and having those people. Well, there's one of those people. You know, he defied all of the stuff in the 1920s to do everything he wasn't supposed to. He didn't come out on top, but it sounds like he had a pretty interesting life while he was at it. I hope you guys have enjoyed hearing about the Ashley gang and another interesting part of Florida. More of that Florida feeling. Check out the Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Still not sure about the TikTok, guys. I don't know if I'm feeling it or not. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Check those out for any updates and I'm going to post a picture of John Ashley so you can see what he looked like. Let me know if you guys have any topics that you guys want to hear. I'm always open to suggestions. Thank you to every one of you who have supported the podcast up until this point. I appreciate you guys greatly. If you have a second, I really would appreciate a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. It helps the podcast go a little bit further. All right, guys. Stay hydrated. Stay dry if you're in Florida because, oh my gosh, all it's doing is raining. Wear sunscreen if you are somewhere that's sunny. Be nice to one another, guys. And as always, that's your daily dose of sunshine.